On December 5, 1945, 5 Navy bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training flight. 14 men. A 2-hour exercise. Clear skies at takeoff. None of them were ever seen again. That, by itself, would be a tragedy. A training accident. A hard lesson in a dangerous profession. But that afternoon became something else, because of what the Navy did next, and what happened to the men who did it. This is Flight 19. This is the case that gave the Bermuda Triangle its name. And unlike most stories in this series, this one comes with something rare. Real radio transcripts. A real Naval Board of Inquiry. And an official verdict that had to be rewritten, years later, because one woman refused to accept it. Let's begin at the beginning. Flight 19 takes off. At 2:10 p.m. on December 5, 1945, 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers lifted off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale. The mission was called Navigation Problem No. 1. A standard training exercise. Fly east over the Atlantic, drop practice bombs on a target, fly further east, then turn north, then turn back west to return to base. A triangle-shaped route, entirely routine, flown by student pilots many times before. Leading the flight was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced combat pilot who had flown dozens of missions in the Pacific. The other 4 pilots were students. 14 men in total. The weather that afternoon was good at takeoff. It would not stay that way. By mid-afternoon, the exercise should have been nearly complete. Instead, radio operators at Fort Lauderdale picked up a transmission from Lieutenant Taylor that should not have been possible for a routine, nearly finished exercise. He said his compasses were not working. He said he believed he was over the Florida Keys, far south of where the exercise should have placed him. He was not over the Florida Keys. Every indication available to investigators afterward suggests he was, in fact, roughly on course, east of the Florida coast, exactly where a normal training flight would be. But Taylor did not believe that. And as the flight's leader, his belief was what mattered. What next? We are completely lost. Over the following 90 minutes, radio operators at Fort Lauderdale and pilots at nearby stations listened to a flight of 5 aircraft get more lost, not less. Taylor gave orders to turn the flight north, believing this would bring them back toward the Florida mainland. Several of the student pilots reportedly disagreed with him, over the radio, in real time, voicing that they believed the flight was heading further out to sea, not back toward land. Taylor overruled them. He was the flight leader. His instruments told him one thing. His instinct told him another. He trusted his instinct. As the afternoon wore on, the weather deteriorated. Storm clouds moved in. The sun began to set. And the fuel gauges on 5 aircraft that had already been airborne for hours began to drop toward empty. The last confirmed transmission from Flight 19 came shortly after 7 p.m. Radio contact had been intermittent for over an hour by that point, fading in and out as the aircraft moved further from land, or further out to sea. No one on the ground could say which was certainty. The final words recorded from the flight described the pilots believing they were about to run out of fuel, discussing ditching together in the ocean so they could stay in a group and await rescue in daylight. After that transmission, nothing. No wreckage. No debris field. No oil slick. No life rafts. 5 aircraft, 14 men, gone from the record entirely. The Navy launched an immediate search. Ships and aircraft from across South Florida were mobilized within the hour. Among them, a Martin Mariner flying boat, tail number designated Training 49, launching from Naval Air Station Banana River with 13 men aboard, sent specifically to search the area where Flight 19 was believed to have gone down. What next? The rescue plane. The Mariner took off at 7:27 p.m. It checked in by radio once, shortly after takeoff, confirming its heading toward the search area. It was never heard from again. At 7:50 p.m., 23 minutes after that final radio check-in, the crew of a tanker ship called the SS Gaines Mills, sailing in the search area, reported seeing a burst of flame in the night sky, followed by what they described as a fire burning on the surface of the ocean for several minutes before it went dark. The tanker's crew altered course toward the location. They found a debris field and a spreading oil slick on the water. They found no survivors, and recovered no bodies. The Martin Mariner was, at the time, known within the Navy by an unofficial nickname among the men who flew them, flying gas tanks. Their design meant that fuel vapors could pool in the lower compartments of the aircraft, and a single spark, from something as small as a cigarette or an electrical fault, was enough to ignite an explosion. This was a known, documented risk of that specific aircraft. It was not a mystery to the Navy. It was, in fact, the leading theory in the official investigation for what happened to the Mariner specifically. But it did not explain Flight 19. 13 more men had been lost searching for 14 who were already gone. In under 4 hours, the Navy had lost 19 aircraft. No. 6 aircraft. 19 men. The search continued for 5 more days. Over trees, over water, across hundreds of thousands of square miles of ocean and coastline. Not one piece of wreckage from Flight 19 was ever recovered. What next? The verdict they had to change. The Navy's Board of Inquiry convened in the weeks that followed. Investigators reviewed the transcripts, the weather reports, the aircraft's known specifications, and the accounts of every pilot and radio operator involved. Their initial finding placed responsibility on Lieutenant Taylor. Pilot error. A disoriented flight leader who led 4 student aircraft to their deaths by refusing to trust his instruments over his own instinct. Taylor's mother did not accept this finding. She wrote to the Navy. She argued that her son was an experienced combat pilot, not a man prone to panic, and that a finding of pilot error, without a single piece of physical evidence to support any explanation at all, was not a conclusion, it was a guess dressed up as one. The Navy reviewed the case again. In a decision that is unusual for a military inquiry, the official finding was changed. The final, official cause of the loss of Flight 19 is not pilot error. It is, in the Navy's own words, still on the record today. Cause unknown. 6 aircraft. 19 men. Not one piece of wreckage, in 80 years, ever confirmed to belong to Flight 19 or the Mariner sent to find it. The compasses that failed were never recovered to be examined. The weather that closed in was real, and documented, and severe. The fuel that ran out was calculated, checked, and confirmed by investigators to align with the timeline of the final transmissions. Every individual piece of this story has an explanation. Together, they have never been fully explained at all. 14 men went looking for a target in the ocean and never came home. 13 more went looking for them, and the ocean took them too, in under half an hour, in view of a tanker crew who could do nothing but watch the sky burn. The official record says cause unknown. Not because nothing happened. Because everything that happened still doesn't add up to an answer. If you've researched a case like this, or have a family connection to one, I want to hear about it. For new stories every day, subscribe my channel Hollow Veins. Cause unknown. That's not a mystery novel's ending. That's the United States Navy's official, permanent verdict. Some questions don't get closed. They just get filed.